Last week, I introduced an overview of my argument that the market economy is the best foundation for an effective socialism. This week, I will flesh out my main points. Chapter 3. Capitalism is fair. We've all heard since childhood that life ain't fair. Some people are tall, some people are short, some people are healthy, some people are sick, some people were born to rich parents, some people were born to poor parents. Martin Heidegger called it thrownness. We're all just thrown randomly into the world and we land where we land. How many Beatles songs do you know? Would it surprise you to learn that they wrote and released nearly 200 original songs before they broke up? Roughly 20% of songs by the Beatles are played 80% of the time Beatles songs are played. Roughly 20% of lions kill 80% of the prey killed by lions. Roughly 20% of waterfalls have 80% of the water falling over waterfalls at any given moment. Roughly 20% of stars in the galaxy have 80% of the mass of stars in the galaxy. This is known as the Pareto distribution. It is a staggeringly consistent statistic found throughout all of nature. For all of human history, roughly 20% of people have possessed 80% of the wealth, which is in accordance with the laws of nature. I have searched long and hard for a socialist argument about the unfairness of capitalism that doesn't boil down to capitalism is unfair because it doesn't make the world fair. But there isn't one. They say capitalism is unfair because, when people are unlucky, it doesn't always save them. They say capitalism is unfair because, when people can't take care of themselves, it doesn't always take care of them. They say capitalism is unfair because some people have more power than others. But Johnson & Johnson makes millions of dollars on the cure for tuberculosis, which compels them to save millions of people from tuberculosis. Capitalism fights human suffering. Amazon made billions of dollars by breaking the monopoly of Walmart. Capitalism fights monopoly. Racist homeowners in apartheid South Africa made money by breaking the law to sell or rent to black families. Capitalism fights racism. Capitalism makes the most of the limitations in the real world by being a strict meritocracy. No matter the inherent limitations everyone must live with, no matter the entrenched interests from the past, no matter the prejudices of the imperfect humans in the present, the more an individual does to serve his or her fellow people, the higher that individual can rise in society. Life ain't fair. The world is not perfect. But capitalism has done more to fight poverty and injustice than any system in human history. Capitalism is fair. Chapter 4. Capitalism is generous. In hunter-gatherer societies, early humans decided that it was worthwhile to hunt and gather. The problem with hunting and gathering is that it increases inequality. Before hunting and gathering, every single member of society has a precisely equal share of nothing. But after hunting and gathering, there is an issue of distribution. And, no matter how things are distributed, it will be unequal. Even if the quantity is equal, not every cut of meat is equally tender, and not every berry is equally juicy. While it is human nature to be jealous of those who have more, so too it is human nature to celebrate achievement and to respect hierarchies of competence and effort. Hunter-gatherers, on the whole, were happy that the most successful hunters and gatherers would get an outsized share of the fruits of their labor, because without those individuals, the rest of the tribe would suffer. We have an abundance of brilliant hunters and gatherers today, and they are so good that we forget that food doesn't magically appear on our supermarket shelves. And when we forget that, when we take the production of such immense wealth for granted, we could be forgiven for the mistake of focusing too highly on wealth distribution. The fact of the matter is, if generating wealth is priority one, the best way to do it is for every person to produce, and for every person to produce, every person must benefit enough to make themselves productive. Distribution follows naturally from generation. But if distributing wealth is priority one, the best way to do it is to stop producing, because every bit of wealth generated is more that must, somehow, be distributed. No socialist seriously denies that capitalism, in whatever form it takes in the real world, has generated more wealth than any system in the history of mankind. And the more wealth that is generated, the more is available to be distributed. Wealth distribution is incredibly important, and we must continue to try to do it better. But no one of any political, philosophical, or religious persuasion can distribute wealth that has not been generated. And, even imperfectly, capitalism does distribute wealth incredibly well. In 1820, 117 million people lived above today's poverty line. Today, 7 billion people live above the poverty line. And in 1820, the richest person on earth had no car, no indoor plumbing, no electric lighting, no cell phone. Today, more than half of people on earth have access to all of those incredible advancements. Capitalism is generous. Chapter 5. Capitalism is democratic. In ancient Athens, the birthplace of democracy, all decisions were made by the ecclesia, the assembly. Every single citizen had the right to appear at and vote in the assembly. Laws were voted on, legal disputes were voted on, declarations of war were voted on, citizenship for foreigners was voted on. Every citizen had the right and opportunity to vote on every decision the government made. One of the most misunderstood elements of capitalism is its use of democracy to set every price. Socialist economics professor Richard Wolff constantly repeats, capitalism is undemocratic. His argument is that big, rich, powerful companies decide what their prices will be. We don't get a vote. In a democratically controlled economy, we could elect someone to decide the price of things, then we could afford them. The problem with this plan is that, if we vote for something to cost less than it is worth, it will not be produced, and will not be available at any price. And would the winner of a popularity contest really set better prices than company owners? In a direct democracy, each of us would have the right and responsibility to vote on the price of every good and service, and we would have the right and responsibility to vote on them again each day as inflation, new technology, red tape, and competition change what the correct price would be. Capitalism has found a genius way of making that constant vote manageable. First, every single citizen is considered the producer of their own labor, as well as any materials they own. Second, every producer is in charge of setting the price for their labor and materials, permitting everyone in the entire economy to simply vote yes or no on that price. Third, every person who does not vote on any particular price is listed as an automatic no. Fourth, every person is allowed to cast no more yes votes than they receive for their own labor and materials. And finally, every producer gets to interpret the vote and choose whether or not to change their price. Capitalism is democratic. In conclusion, socialism is about building a more fair, more generous, and more democratic economy. Though the world ain't fair, capitalism is as fair as the world will allow. Though the world is marked by privation and inequality, capitalism is as generous as the world has ever seen. And though no one has the time or interest to involve themselves in every one of the Google of decisions being made at any given moment, capitalism gives the most people the most opportunity to have their voices heard on the most possible economic decisions. Capitalism is the best socialism. Thank you for spending some time with a man with no shoes. Please like and subscribe if you got anything out of it, leave a comment if you have any thoughts worth sharing, and join me next week to evolve past the concept of the socio-economy.